everybody. I'm here on the ninth hole at the Port Townsend Golf Course. And I'm here today to do a walk of the course to help give you a sense spatially of what we're talking about as far as how well this property is utilized or not. Here we go, walking down the ninth green. And it's a little windy, so hopefully you can hear me okay. But I am here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's summer. What is it? July 1st, I think. Beautiful day, probably mid 60s, upper 60s. So this is prime golfing time, right? In theory, this would be the time when this property is used maximally by golfers. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they like to come a little or more early in the morning. But here we are walking down the ninth green. What I'm going to do is put a number on screen for every golfer we see. So basically I'm going to make a tally, and that way after I walk the entire course in reverse, we can see how many golfers we came across. And I am not here to be confrontational. I'm not here to get in an argument with anybody. I'm just trying to visually represent this space in a accurate way, because I know most of the public around Port Townsend doesn't spend time here on this property. I don't really spend much time here either. I like to run, and sometimes in the mornings real early I'll run around the property just to get off the pavement. But anyway, while I'm walking, I thought I would just share my basic thoughts and feelings about this whole issue. And if I feel like I've articulated myself well enough, then I'll just put this whole video up. If you see any skips at all, it's because I didn't like the way I said something and I just cut a bit out, but I won't I won't cut out any people that I come across. So we're nearing the tee of the ninth hole, and so really for me, the argument for a change on this property starts with use, and that's why I'm doing this today, because it's severely underutilized. It's a 58-acre publicly owned piece of property, and I've ridden my bike around it, walked around it, drove around it for many years. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way to the ninth tee, but there it is. I'm going to turn this way. We're going over to the hole, or the eighth hole here. Anyway, I've traveled around this property for many years, and always just kind of looked on it and said to myself, wow, this property is not being used well at all. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. And so that's kind of where my argument begins. It's been really difficult to get any sort of accurate usage numbers from the operator of the golf course. Their bookkeeping that they're required to submit to the city has some glitches, so we don't have accurate numbers on usage. Some people have attempted to figure that out based on the financial information that they submit to the city, which is a requirement of the lease with the city because they pay taxes based on revenue. And so I've heard that somebody took recent financial figures, divided it by the senior rate, and came up with approximately 10 rounds of golf played on average per day over the course of a year. Now, 58 acres divided by 10, so you got about 5.8 acres per person per day. That's one person using almost 6 acres per day of this publicly owned property, which, by the way, if you include the cost of water, and it's something like approximately 8 or so million gallons per year that the city gives to the golf course. Well, 7 million are free, and then they pay after that. But if you include the cost to the city of all the water that's used, then this course not only is underutilized, but is actually being heavily subsidized by the public for those few people to use it. And that's to the tune of about $42,000 per year over the last 5 years. And by the way, I'll put links wherever I can to source documents. A lot of that's going to be documents that the city has posted on their website to try to be as transparent as possible and to aid people in their own investigation into this issue. But some of the links will be also to some social media posts that I've made where I look at those documents or those numbers and analyze them further. So that's the first argument, is about usage. It's so low. We haven't come across a single person yet, like I said. Beautiful sunny summer afternoon. I mean, even if we had already run into some golfers, I would argue that a golf course is not a good use of city property, just by the very nature of golf, being that a single golfer takes up so much space in order to be safe. But I think that so far my theory about usage here is proving correct, because we're still at 0. So moving on from usage, let's talk about access and equity. I guess that kind of naturally springs from the usage argument. If this golf course was wildly busy and there were just golfers here all day long, I think you can do 4 golfers on a hole at a time, and it's open 8-10 hours a day. So if there were 1, 2, 3, 4 people on each hole a good portion of the day, where am I going here? I think this is a short hole. Yeah, let's see, I think I go up this way. Then, and our town was just crazy about golf, and there were lots of people here who golf. Then I'd say, all right, maybe it makes sense. I would still have issues with the subsidization and the price, because a round of golf here does not reflect the true price. And I would still have qualms about the environmental impact of a golf course. I do generally. But it's just not the case. There's nobody here. Look around. You can't, but I can. There's nobody here. I haven't run into a single person yet. I think I've walked 3 holes. And so this is not a place where there's a big demand for a public golf course in the middle of our city. And even if there was, we also, by chance, not by chance, we also have a couple other really great golf courses very close by. The Discovery Bay Golf Course is 6.4 miles away from clubhouse to clubhouse, comparably priced. It's a little more in the summer, but if the plan to improve this course goes through, I've heard it said that the price of golf here is going to go up to about $25 a round. And so there goes the affordability argument for keeping this course. You could say, yeah, it's more convenient because it's closer, but really, how close do you need it to be? So we're turning here, going over to across the driving range, and I think this is the way I get to the end of hole 6. Not totally sure. Take a second to look at the driving range. Nobody here. All right. And so anyway, that creates the question, or it begs the question, how is this use of this property equitable? We have a 58-acre beautiful piece of property in the middle of our town, completely monopolized by golf. Some people like to say, oh, you can come hang out here and get something to eat. I mean, it's true. The diner is open to the public, but I don't know anybody who does that. I mean, I'm sure golfers do. But, you know, I sometimes I feel like in the minds of a lot of golfers, like they think it is actually public because anybody could play golf, and when they look around, they don't see like all the people that are not using this course. They see like a potential golfer in each person. That's just a feeling I get from some comments that I've heard. All right, we are maybe walking down hole 6, I think. And so anyway, I think there's a real equity issue here. This property is not accessible to the vast majority of the public. We have a very vocal, very small minority of the public that cares about it, plays golf here, or supports the idea of golf here. But for everybody else, we are excluded from this property. And not only that, but we're sinking money into it. We're subsidizing golf when there are courses nearby, and the property is environmentally unhealthy. Maybe I'll jump over to there next. So some golfers have tried to make the argument that this is environmentally healthy or sustainable piece of land. And I think the only validity to that argument has to do with the fact that it's pervious, so it absorbs rainwater, as opposed to if it were primarily housing or something. So that's a good thing. But every other argument they have about how this property is environmentally healthy in any way surrounds or centers around the aspects of the property that have very little to do with golf. People have said you see a lot of bird species here. Okay, I'm sure some birds live in these trees, and I'm sure most of the birds live around the pond. The pond has nothing to do with golf. I haven't seen a single other animal of any kind. I do hear that deer live here. Okay, fine. Foxes, maybe raccoons, fine. But this is not a resilient or sustainable piece of property. This is a highly manufactured, highly unnatural piece of property that I've also heard has Roundup put on it or other chemicals. I've heard it stated that it's not a lot, but I don't have any access to what that information might be. A friend said that they took a look in their shed one time here at the golf course and found big bottles of Roundup. So that's a known carcinogen, and that's being sprayed in theory. Actually, I think that same friend said that they had it confirmed from the golf course owner that they do in fact use it on the greens or the tee boxes. So there's awful chemicals being dumped onto the property right there, leaching into the water system, going downwind, etc. What else? This is mostly just some kind of grass. I don't know what kind it is. Yeah, there's a number of trees. Obviously, there could be a lot more. There are, other than the native plant prairie, which is about 1.25 acres, I think. Other than that, there's very little like flowers here. I've seen the flowers grow and then they mow them pretty quickly thereafter. So there's very little of anything here to support pollinator insect habitat. This property could be so much healthier, so much more resilient. And, you know, some people might say, so what? It's just a piece of property in town. The environmental situation globally is in really bad shape, and what's one piece of property what difference is that gonna make here on one piece of property? But I would argue that it's within our means, and it's also well within the community's desire to have this property be much healthier, much more resilient. And so on that note, the Central Park option would begin with a lot of revegetation and slowly phase out a lot of this grass, which needs to be mowed, of course. So there's fossil fuel usage right there. And over time, as more and more native plant area is established, and initially those plants are going to need water inputs, but the idea being that they don't require long-term water inputs in the way that a golf course does. And so as the amount of grass reduces and we get more and more native plants on the property, we can start to cut back on how much water is being dumped on this property. Can cut back on how much mowing has to happen, and we can start to see a really vibrant, diverse ecosystem grow up here that supports pollinators, insects, small animals, some larger animals, no megafauna obviously, but maybe some more medium to larger animals. And we could put a lot more trees here, help with air quality. So there's a lot of unrealized potential here as I see it, and a lot of negative effects right now of continuing to operate it as a golf course. By the way, we're still at 0. I'm starting to wonder if this place is closed today or something. It's kind of weird. I mean, it's not, because I almost never see anybody here when I drive by, but I expected by now to have run across a few people. Okay, so that's the environmental argument. I think we're coming to the T of hole 5 here, maybe. Now I want to talk, what else? Equity, environment, sustainability, that kind of folds into the environmental argument. I guess let's talk cost for a little bit. Right now, the lessee pays a small figure each year based on revenue to the city. It hovers around 8 or 10 grand a year. Oh, here's a golfer. Here we go. Behind that tree. Gonna walk off to the side. All right, we got a couple people here. Cool. So 8 or 10 grand a year revenue to the city, but like I said, when you look at all the costs to the city, it ends up being a negative to the tune of about 42 grand a year. And so that is what it currently costs to run the golf course. And then looking forward, the development costs are about, I think, 1.4 million over the course of like 10 years in order to improve the course according to the city's hybrid plan. And that's not entirely course, that's partially some of the new amenities that would be added. But that is cost that would have to be spent by the city. It's not eligible for any sort of grants. And then there's operations and maintenance costs. A lot of those are borne by the lessee, but some are borne by the city. You can get into the lease if you want to get all the details there. And I've heard that the city wants better terms to the lease should a golf course continue to exist here. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I don't know what those new terms would look like exactly. I believe we got something like 30 to 40,000 a year was the figure that was cited as potential operations and maintenance costs for a hybrid park plan going forward that includes an improved golf course. And I'll put a link to a summary of costs that I did recently so you can look at that. But that hybrid plan that the city is considering, it removes the driving range. It moves a couple holes over to where the driving range currently is, makes them a little shorter to free up about maybe 10-15 acres for some alternative uses. By the way, in the first round of feedback from the first open house that the city did on this, golf ranked 6 in the list of preferred existing and alternative uses here on this property by the public, or by all the public that engaged. And I want to say it was something like 1,500 people in that first round. So anyway, one of the two options on the table right now, at this late stage, is the hybrid option. It does retain a 9-hole golf course with a slightly smaller footprint and adds some alternative uses on the, I guess that would be the south end of the property. I'll put a link to that hybrid plan or a document where you can find it. And so I was talking about costs. Sorry, I got a little bit mixed up because there's the restored golf course option that's not at all eligible for state grants. Then there's the hybrid option, which parts of it are. Basically, the parts that would improve the golf course are not, but the parts that would turn part of the property into a park are. And so the cost to the city there is lower because of those matching grants. And then there's an operations and maintenance figure. I'll put it on screen. And then the Central Park option has the highest development cost figure, but is eligible for the 35% matching grants. So that greatly reduces the cost to the city. The development period is also over a much longer period, 21 years. So that's in 2-year cycles. Port Townsend applying for these grants and adding these new uses and new elements of the development over a longer period of time in order to greater utilize state funds. And I've heard it said that a project like this is highly competitive for those types of grants. Then there's the operations and maintenance cost of the Central Park, and that is definitely higher, which makes sense because we're talking about operating and maintaining a 58-acre park as opposed to a much smaller 10-15 acre park, and then a golf course that the lessee primarily operates. And initially in the presentation to the Stakeholders Committee, the operation costs around that were around $55,000 a year, and then it was stated at the third open house that they were perhaps as much as $90,000. I'm not sure how that number got bumped up quite that much, but we are talking about a full-time employee hired by the Parks Department to maintain this park. And so it would cost more. But when you look at the development costs to the city and the operating costs over a long period of time, say 100 years, it's not that much more than the hybrid plan. I mean, compared to other projects that are on the table right now, like the pool, which, I'd love to have a good pool here. But we're talking about very small dollar figures per year compared to other projects. And I think it's something that the city can afford. I mean, that's a lot. There's a lot of unknowns there. That's kind of a whole other can of worms. I will say a little bit about it. I think I've heard it said that some significant portion of the financial troubles of the city has to do with the fact that we don't have the density we need, so we're not getting as much tax revenue as we need to be able to support the current infrastructure and operations. And there's a lot of good work being done right now around density and affordability. And so my hope is that we can get that right, and that will significantly increase the tax revenues locally and make a park like this very reasonable to operate and maintain. All right, still going here. We're near the pond. Can't really see it, but it's over there. And still only 2 golfers. A little windy. I don't know. Do people not golf when it's windy? Maybe not. Anyway, I'm probably forgetting something about the financial side of things. But I'll leave it there for now. Maybe add some links. And I'll say, I guess I probably should have started by saying that I've been on the Stakeholders committee that formed back in the fall of 2022 to explore this issue. It's a group of 21, maybe 22 people. I'm one of the few people on it that are not affiliated with some sort of group. So most of the people are representatives of some kind of organization or just user group, like dog park users, pickleball players, the YMCA, school board, Parks Department, Native Plant Society, the Native Prairie people, golf course, Players Club, of course. And we've been meeting about monthly, so I think we've had 10 or 11 meetings. Been trying to really engage people around this issue. Our role, as it was described, or as I remember it, is to be engaged, educate ourselves, engage others, be fair, be collaborative, and I've tried to be all those things. Privately, I have feelings about this issue, and I have not tried to censor my feelings in my communications around the issue, and I don't think I need to. And there's been some talk, especially at the last in-person open house, about how the stakeholders are trying to be objective, and I just don't buy that. I think if we were objective, we wouldn't be stakeholders. We're stakeholders because everybody has some sort of stake in it, and yes, it's a dialogue. Yes, we want to come to some sort of consensus, and we want to be good neighbors and, good community members and all that. But, it's also a fight, to be honest. I mean, if you're a golfer and this process may end up closing the golf course, then you're fighting for the course that you play on. And again, I think that community is very small. It's been very vocal and very organized, which makes perfect sense. It has the most to lose. And it's also hard to rally people around a kind of imagined future alternative that doesn't currently exist. I want to take a moment to just look at this pond. It's really beautiful here. At least by the pond, not so much on the fairways. Where was I? Oh yeah, talking about recent developments. And so anyway, there was an attempt by the leadership of the committee to explain to the public at the last open houses why they were being presented with both the Central Park option and the hybrid option, even though the hybrid option did not get the second most, not votes, but dots and survey responses. The reason being that the committee felt that the hybrid option met a lot more of the decision-making criteria than a restored golf course did. And, you know, knowing that golfers would be upset that there wouldn't be a restored golf course option, or that the hybrid option was going to take away the driving range. Are we on is this the first hole? I think it might be. So anyway, knowing that they'd be upset about that, there was an attempt to justify the decision to include Central Park and hybrid. And as part of that attempt, there were some stakeholders who spoke about how the hybrid option met more of the decision-making criteria, and about how fair we've tried to be. And they even kind of overstepped and said that we had come to a consensus around the hybrid option after much careful deliberation, which is not accurate. There was a meeting was it in early June or late May or something, where there was a general sentiment that probably some sort of compromise solution where everybody gets some of what they want might be better than, you know, half the people getting all of what they want, because this has been a very kind of evenly divided issue. Just if you look at the numbers from Open House 2, and the way I split it is Central Park plus the Space for Nature option, which ultimately gets rid of golf, got about 50%, and then the two options that keep golf in some form, restored golf course and hybrid, also got about 50%. After that, those results came in, I was just feeling like, man, we're so divided on this. I don't know a path forward except some sort of compromise. And I'm still very much open to some kind of compromise. I haven't even spoken about the Players Club plan, which I don't believe represents much of a compromise at all. I don't even think the hybrid option goes far enough to create a fair compromise based on community feedback. But I'm still open to some kind of compromise. I think a lot of people are. But unfortunately, it seems like a lot of golfers are really not. I mean, they have this plan that they drew up. They say, some people are even calling it hybrid. They say it represents a fair compromise. I say it spends a lot of money on improving a golf course that very few people are playing, as you can see. And so I just think that's wildly out of step with the community as a whole. What else to say? I think I'm getting near the end of the first hole here. I guess I'll wrap it up by saying, please share the video. Send comments to City Council. Attend City Council meetings if you can, June 10th and June 17th. The final vote for this whole process by City Council is scheduled for June 17th. It'd be great if a lot of people showed up there, maybe even with signs saying, you know, we want a Central Park, something like that. Talk with your friends and family about it. Write a letter to the leader or the PDN, although I think it's pretty clear at this point the coverage by the leader has been very biased and just kind of neglectful. I don't know if they have the resources to cover this issue well. and combine that with their bias, and I just think they're doing a pretty poor job on this. But yeah, I really appreciate you watching. We ran into 2 people so far. Maybe we'll get one more just starting to play here as we come to the end of the walk. And so 2 people, 58 acres, 2 people at this particular point in time. But I'm looking around. I don't see anybody else that's started. I'll take another look before I leave. Maybe I'll put that in the notes if I saw anybody else. But we have, what's half of 58? 29? 1 person per 29 acres. Is that equitable? Is that accessible? I don't think so. I don't know what's going to happen. I've thought that this is a completely absurd arrangement for a long time. I'm really glad the city is attempting a robust engagement process around change. It hasn't been perfect. A lot of people on all sides have criticisms, but I think they've tried really hard. I think there's a lot of good people working on this, and hopefully it results in some change. So we'll see.